Hello, I'm Joel Kramer, and I'm an archaeology student here in Israel.
How are you so crazy about me? You gave your life to set me free. By your grace that I had never known, I am saved, my life is yours alone. La da 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 da. 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 I was just thinking to myself, am I saved? Where would I go if I were to die today? Could you help me know the truth?
So we'll just talk for a moment. So you all were just at Qumran proper, where you see the trees back here and where the ruins of the Essenes are. So along this whole stretch here, 11 caves have been discovered that had scrolls in them. Okay, so the one that's the furthest north is right around that bend that you see, that furthest ridge line, right around there. It's cave number 3. And then you have caves through here all the way to the other side, the southern side of the Qumran where you were. Cave 7 and 8 and so forth are there, but now they've collapsed and they don't look like anything anymore. So 11 caves where biblical scrolls have been found. All the biblical books are found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Esther is represented in the scrolls, not an actual copy from Esther, but a commentary about Esther. So you're not commentating on something that doesn't exist. So it attests to it being in existence at the time of the 2nd and 1st century BC. So where we're going is cave number 1. Cave number 1 is the first, called cave number 1 because it's the first cave that was discovered. So this is the initial discovery, and I call it, I think almost all archaeologists would agree, that it is the most significant, impactful, important archaeological discovery of all time. Ironically, it was not discovered by archaeologists, it was discovered by a shepherd. So now the gazelle are down in this flat area. Up in the rocky ridges up there are the ibex, which are the wild goats.
Where's the lions at?
There used to be leopards and there used to be lions. Lions were more in the Jordan Valley and up in the mountains. And then the bears that were here are grizzly bears. We found in archaeology they found bear bones and skulls. Yeah. We have them depicted in mosaics and whatnot. They're grizzly bears, which makes sense if you think about it, because if you take North America and Asia, right, they almost meet at the Bering Strait. So where do you have grizzly bears today? And when I say grizzly bears, I mean brown bears. Grizzlies, we call them when they're in the mountains and they don't have salmon runs to feed off of. So you have grizzly bears on the Russian side and on the Alaskan side, right? How far did they used to go down on the American side? All the way down to California, which is on your flag. Although they're not there anymore, they're not in Arizona anymore. It's the same way over on the Asian side. They came all the way down into this area, though they're not here, like they're not in California anymore, they were. We're just going to work our way up here, and no big, huge hurry or anything, so take your time.
So where is it exactly?
It's right up this chute. It's up that kind of pillar that's kind of leaned over. It's up above that. Not very far above that. Now, there's kind of a ibex type trail along here, so kind of stay behind me and follow the person in front of you, and we'll try to do it in a more systematic way rather than just going up it in some random manner. Okay, so this is the site of the most important archaeological discovery of all time. The thing I want you to understand about it before we go in is that these holes that you see here, those were opened by archaeologists. So they were not here when the cave was found. So the only opening when the cave was found is this hole that you see up here. So the story that the shepherds told is that when he lost a goat, he went looking for him. He took a rock and he threw it down into this hole, and he heard pottery break. So he crawled through the hole, he got in there, he saw these pots, he was very excited. He opened them up, he was very disappointed. They weren't full of gold and diamonds. They only had these animal skins with writing on them. And so he took some of them out and showed it to people in his family, and eventually they made it up to the antiquity market in Jerusalem. They were identified as authentic, and then archaeologists came in and broke this area out and excavated the cave and found a whole bunch more scrolls inside of the cave that were underneath, were buried. This is the most important cave because it's the first one. It's also the cave that has the most complete scrolls in it. And so you were just down at Qumran and you were looking at cave number 4. Cave number 4, the 3 most important out of the 11 are cave number 1, cave number 4, and cave number 11. So the first, the last, and number 4. Number 4 is important because of so many biblical books came out of there, but they're very, very fragmentary. The more complete scrolls came out of cave number 1, including the scroll that is known as the Great Isaiah Scroll. So when you were at the museum yesterday, you saw the replica on display that was around. That scroll was found in here, and it dates to very, very, very liberally, the liberal date on it is 125 BC. But a lot of scholars put it at 200, many even put it as early as 300 BC. So before we go in, let's just talk about the significance of that. A lot has been said about the Dead Sea Scrolls. If I had a dime for every lecture I've sat through on the Dead Sea Scrolls that absolutely put me to sleep, I would be a rich man. I mean, what is talked about often is the details, and there's that old saying that we miss so often, we miss the forest for the trees, right? So what is the forest issue for the Dead Sea Scrolls? Everybody talks about, well, they speak to the reliability of the Old Testament. That's absolutely true. The oldest copies that we had before, they predate those by 1,000 years. So that's true. You'll hear people say that you'll hear secular scholars say that there's differences in the scrolls. There's 2 Isaiah scrolls that come out of this cave, and they are different. So, but what isn't explained is why they're different. One of them comes from close to 70 AD, and the other one comes from the 3rd to 2nd century BC. And the only thing that is more valuable to date than pottery are inscriptions. Why? Because just as pottery styles change rapidly over time, language changes rapidly over time. And so if you get an isolated inscription or text, you can tell where that comes from. So what changed from the 2nd century BC to the 1st century AD that separates out these 2 scrolls of Isaiah? Well, spelling changed. The use of certain words to describe something changed, and kinds of things like that. We're talking not things that affect the meaning of the scrolls, but just the basic things that change over time in a language. If you look at Old English, you won't even recognize it compared to the English that we use today. So it's the same in meaning, but the details of certain things changed over time. Does that make sense? The analogy I like to give is imagine a Christian church, a large Christian church in America that was destroyed in a sudden destruction, because that's why we have these scrolls, is the 70 AD destruction. They hid these scrolls, and they probably all died. Why? Because they never came back for their scrolls. Right? So say that you have a Christian church, a large one, that is destroyed in America, and then a couple thousand years later, archaeologists come along and they dig it up. What are they going to find? Are they just going to find one kind of Bible that all agree with each other? Probably not. There's probably going to be ESV Bibles in there, and NIV Bibles, and New American Standard, and King James, and Old King James, and New King James. You see what I mean? Is it a problem that all of those different Bibles are used in that context to understand what God communicated with us in His original Word? No, of course not, because they all hold the same meaning. And so you have the same thing in the Dead Sea Scrolls. You have those insignificant differences that help us date the scrolls, but you have preserved in all of them the meaning of what God is telling us in when the original prophets wrote down those scriptures. Now, what is the most important thing, in my opinion, that the Dead Sea Scrolls contribute? And that would be that they predate Jesus of Nazareth. Okay, so you were at Bethlehem yesterday, right? Church of Nativity. No question about it, that's where Jesus was born. These scrolls preserve the messianic prophecies to 150 to 200 years before Jesus is born in Bethlehem. So let me give you an example. In cave number 4 that you were just looking at over there, there's a fragment that contains Micah 5:2. Micah 5:2 talks about the ruler who will be from eternity, who will be born in Bethlehem of Ephrathah, right? That scroll fragment is older by 150 years than the event of Jesus' fulfillment of His birth, which is now marked by the Church of the Nativity. And you have that double-edged sword. You have God telling us what He's going to do. Before He does it, it's written down, so you can't say that it's not a prediction. It's all written down and preserved in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And then the events themselves through the person of Jesus of Nazareth, which fulfill those prophecies. I'll give you another example. The great Isaiah scroll has all of the scrolls of the prophecies of Isaiah obviously preserved in that scroll. We call Isaiah the messianic prophet, right, because he's got so many prophecies about the coming Messiah. And there's the story in the New Testament of Jesus who goes to the synagogue in Nazareth where he grew up. He goes into the synagogue. They hand him a scroll, and specifically the scroll of Isaiah. He opens it to a specific place, which is today chapter 61 of Isaiah, and he reads about the Anointed One, which is means Messiah and all that He will accomplish. Then he puts the scroll down and he goes and sits down, and the eyes of everybody are on him, and he tells them, "This is fulfilled in your midst," right, here today. Again, the Isaiah scroll that was found in this cave is older than the event of that story. So it's the evidence, what I like to call the evidence of time. Scholars are stuck on this one. Secular scholars are stuck because for all the Old Testament things that are fulfilled in history, that are prophesied in the Bible, we don't have texts that go back earlier than those events. So they just go into Isaiah, for example, and they assign a Assyrian time period Isaiah, and then, it's talking about the Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem. Okay, we got to put in a Babylonian time period Isaiah writer. Oh, look, Cyrus is being mentioned. We got to put in a Persian period because that's their only explanation. How would they know about Cyrus who's going to come hundreds of years in the future? There's got to be an add-on at that point. Do you see that? Where they run into the obstacle is with the Dead Sea Scrolls, and specifically with Jesus in the fulfillment of the Messiah. Because there you have all the messianic prophecies, of which there are many, many, many. And then you have this historical figure who fulfills them all. So you can't say that those aren't really predictions, that they were made up after the fact, because they're found here. They're obviously predictions. They're preserved before the fulfillment. They tried to wiggle out of it by saying, well, Jesus isn't historical then. Well, then why is he talked about by all these other historians and so on and so forth? Where did Christianity come from if it didn't come from him? It'd be like arguing against Mormonism by saying that Joseph Smith never lived. It's idiotic. It doesn't work. So they're stuck with a historical person on one side that did all these things and all these events, and is this person a son of David and born where he's supposed to be born, and then all the predictions over here that are preserved before that. It's over.
What else do you need?
There's no way to argue it. You know how they argue it?
Ignore it.
They ignore it. Exactly. Yeah. You go and you hear all these talks on the Dead Sea Scrolls. That is never brought up once.
Nice social.
So we can't see great right now, but we can see a little bit. So he pointed out Mount Nebo to you, correct? Over on the other side where Moses was looking this way at the Promised Land. He wasn't looking at the Judean wilderness. He was looking up above the Judean wilderness at the mountain ridge over there. And then if you go down the Dead Sea here, you see a first kind of break in the Dead Sea in the other side, like a canyon coming in. And then you can go a little bit further and you'll see it drop off right there. You can barely see it. It's back as far as you can see. You see that's the Arnon Gorge. And so that is on that southern side is Moab proper. That's the Moabites that you read in your Bible live on that side. Every now and then they push up further north and take this area for a while, but they live on the other side of the Arnon Gorge. Okay, now that side from the Arnon Gorge north is part of ancient Israel, because if you'll remember when they came in with Moses and Joshua, then some of the tribes, Reuben and Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh, took land on that side of the east side of the Jordan. So when you're reading in your Old Testament and you read Gilead, that's what it's talking about, is the east side of the Jordan. So this was Reuben's territory right here, and then up a little further north is Gad, and then all the way up into the Golan Heights area is where the half-tribe of Manasseh was. Also, we can cover the surrounding people just really quickly. So to the north of Israel were the Arameans. Okay, and they are related to Abraham and so forth. And then, so we got the Arameans, then we got the Ammonites, we have the Moabites, and then way down farther south we got the Edomites, and then we've got Egyptians, and then we've got the Philistines, and then we have the Phoenicians, and then we're back to the Arameans. So Arameans, Phoenicians, Philistines, Egyptians, Edomites, Moabites, Ammonites, and Arameans.
And that was at the time that they came across.
Yes. So when you're reading your Bible, you're reading about all these surrounding nations in all these different periods. They all have basically the same religious practices. They have the same concept of gods and goddesses and fertility and all these kinds of things. They call these same gods by different names according to their nation and their language. Their languages are very similar. They're all Semitic languages, and that's why you have Aramean as the main language that's spoken for a very long time, even in the days of Jesus, and until Greek takes over, and so on and so forth. So it's not a huge place, and
lots of people.
Lots of people.
Lots of history.
We've all fallen short of the glory of God, but you cover all of us with holy blood. We are nothing without you. We have every